Chapter 4: Predictability and Control. The focus in this chapter is on the two other dimensions of McDonaldization: predictability and control. Predictability. It never rains on those little houses on the hillside. In a rationalized society, people prefer to know what to expect in most settings. They neither desire nor expect surprises. They want to know that, when they order their Big Mac today, it will be identical to the one they ate yesterday and the one they will eat tomorrow. People would be upset if the special sauce was used one day, but not the next, or if it tasted differently from one day to the next. They want to know that the McDonald's franchise they visit in Des Moines, Los Angeles, Paris, or Beijing will appear and operate much the same as their local McDonald's. From the consumer's point of view, predictability makes for much peace of mind in day-to-day dealings. For workers, predictability makes tasks easier. In fact, some workers prefer effortless, mindless, repetitive work because, if nothing else, it allows them to think of other things, even daydream, while they are doing their tasks. For managers and owners, too, predictability makes life easier. It helps them manage both workers and customers and aids in anticipating needs for supplies and materials, personnel requirements, income, and profits. Predictability, however, has a downside. It has a tendency to turn everything, consumption, work, management, into mind-numbing routine. Creating predictable settings, motel chains like fast food restaurants are pioneers in the rationalization process. The most notable are Best Western, founded in 1946 in more than 4,000 hotels in 90 countries, and Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express, which started in 1952. Holiday Inn is now part of the Intercontinental Hotels Group, which claims to be the world's largest hotel chain with about 400 hotels in more than 100 countries. About 300 of them carry the Holiday Inn logo. By the late 1950s, about 500 Howard Johnson's restaurants, and only 3 remain, were scattered around the United States, many with standardized motels attached to them. Unlike other motel chains, Howard Johnson's has stagnated, but it still has 475 motels in 13 countries. It is now part of Wyndham Worldwide. These 3 motel chains, and others, opened in anticipation of the massive expansion of highways and highway travel. Their ability to bring consistency to the motel and hotel industry was the basis of their success and has been widely emulated. Motel chains. Magic fingers. But no Norman Bates. Before the development of such chains, motels were very diverse and highly unpredictable. Run by local owners. Every motel was different from every other. Because the owners and employees varied from one locale to another, guests could not always feel fully safe and sleep soundly. One motel might be quite comfortable, even luxurious, but another might well be a hovel. People could never be sure which amenities would be present. Soap, shampoo, telephones, radio, and later television, air conditioning, and please don't forget the much-loved magic fingers massage system. Checking into a motel was an adventure. A traveler never knew what to expect. In his classic thriller Psycho, 1960, Alfred Hitchcock beautifully exploited the anxieties about old-fashioned, unpredictable motels. The motel in the movie was creepy, but not as creepy as its owner, Norman Bates. Although it offered few amenities, the Bates motel room did come equipped with a peephole, something most travelers could do without, so that Norman could spy on his victims. Of course, the Bates Motel offered the ultimate in unpredictability: a homicidal maniac and a horrible death to unsuspecting guests. Although very few independently owned motels actually housed crazed killers, all sorts of unpredictabilities confronted travelers at that time. In contrast, the motel chains took pains to make their guests' experience predictable. They developed tight hiring practices to keep unpredictable people from managing or working in them. Travelers could anticipate that a motel equipped with the then familiar orange and green Holiday Inn sign, and now gone the way of McDonald's oversized golden arches, would have most, if not all, the amenities they could reasonably expect in a moderately priced motel. Faced with the choice between a local, no-name motel and a Holiday Inn, many travelers preferred the predictable, even if it had liabilities and the absence of a personal touch. For example, the success of the early motel chains has led to many imitators, such as Ramada Inn and Roadway Inn, now part of Choice Hotels International. The more price-conscious chains, Super 8, Days Inn, and Motel 6, are, if anything, even more predictable. The budget motel chains are predictably barren. Guests find only the minimal requirements. But they expect the minimum, and that's what they get. They also expect and receive bargain basement prices for the rooms. The fast food industry. The fast food industry quickly adopted and perfected practices pioneered by, among other precursors, the motel chains. In fact, Robin Ledner argues that its success comes from relentless standardization. She states that there is a McDonald's way to handle virtually every detail of the business, and that doing things differently means doing things wrong. Although McDonald's allows its franchisees and managers to innovate, the object is to look for new innovative ways to create an experience that is exactly the same no matter what McDonald's you walk into, no matter where it is in the world. Like the motel chains, McDonald's, and many other franchises, devised a large and familiar sign that soon became recognizable to customers. Even though the signs are now smaller and less obtrusive, they still conjure a feeling of familiarity and predictability for consumers. Furthermore, each McDonald's presents a series of predictable elements. Counter, menu marquee above it, visible kitchen in the back. This predictable setting appears not only throughout the United States, but also in many other parts of the world. Thus, homesick American tourists can take comfort in the knowledge that nearly anywhere they go, they will likely run into those familiar golden arches and the restaurant to which they have become so accustomed. Interestingly, even many non-Americans now take comfort in the appearance of a familiar McDonald's restaurant when they journey to other countries, including the United States itself. This kind of predictability is much the same in all fast food chains. Starbucks has its familiar green and white sign, Mermaid, recently streamlined, counter for placing and paying for orders, display case filled mainly with pastries, and a separate counter where specialty drinks are made and retrieved. Then there is Kentucky Fried Chicken, with its cartoonish image of Colonel Sanders, Wendy's little girl with red pigtails, Taco Bell with its logo that features a bell, Papa John's red, white, and green logo designed to remind us of Italy by replicating the colors of the Italian flag, and In-N-Out Burger's sweeping yellow arrow. Other settings, E.T. can't find his home as work settings. Bureaucracies are far more predictable than other kinds of organizations. They engender predictability in at least three important ways. First, employees occupy offices and are expected to live up to expectations associated with them. Second, A bureaucracy has a clear hierarchy of offices, so that people know from whom to take orders and to whom they may give orders. Third, virtually everything in a bureaucracy exists in written form. Thus, those who read the organization's rules and regulations know what can be expected. Handling an issue often involves little more than filling out a particular form. These days, such forms are on the computer, as are all messages in the form of emails and their attachments, text messages, tweets, and so on. Megachurches are defined as churches with more than 2,000 members. The largest one is Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, with an average attendance of 43,500. The 380 megachurches in the United States play a central role in the McDonaldization of religion. For example, a McLean, Virginia megachurch is planning to expand by opening 9 satellite locations around the Washington Beltway. A number of megachurches now have satellite locations. While there might be some variation, some customization from one satellite to another's, live music, local pastors all hear a portion of the same sermon at the same time via television. This serves to bring a polished, predictable, and branded performance to every location served by the megachurch. Modern suburban housing also demonstrates the predictability of settings in a McDonaldized society. A famous folk song, in fact, characterizes the suburbs as little boxes on the hillside. Little boxes made of ticky-tacky. Little boxes, little boxes, little boxes all the same. In many suburban communities, interiors and exteriors are little different from one house to another. Although some diversity exists in the more expensive developments, many suburbanites could easily wander into someone else's house and not realize immediately that they were not in their own home. Furthermore, the communities themselves look very much alike. Rows of saplings held up by posts and wire are planted to replace mature trees ripped out of the ground to allow for the more efficient building of houses. Similarly, hills are often bulldozed to flatten the terrain. Streets are laid out in familiar patterns. With such predictability, suburbanites may well enter the wrong suburban community or get lost in their own community. Several of Steven Spielberg's early movies take place in these rationalized suburbs. Spielberg's strategy is to lure viewers into this highly predictable world and then hit them with a highly unpredictable event. For example, in E.T., a 1982, an extraterrestrial wanders into a suburban development of tract houses and is discovered by a child there who, until that point, has lived a highly predictable suburban existence. The unpredictable E.T. eventually disrupts not only the lives of the child and his family, but also the entire community. Similarly, Poltergeist, 1982, takes place in a suburban household, with evil spirits disrupting its predictable tranquility. The great success of several of Spielberg's movies may be traceable to people's longing for some unpredictability, even if it is frightening and menacing in their increasingly predictable suburban lives. The Truman Show, as 1998, takes place in a community completely controlled by the director of a television show. The movie can be seen as a spoof of, and attack on, the Disney-esque planned communities springing up throughout the United States. These are often more upscale than the typical suburban community. The leading example of a planned community is, not surprisingly, Disney's town of Celebration, Florida. Potential homeowners must choose among approved options and are strictly limited in what they can do with their homes and property. These communities go farther than traditional suburban developments in seeking to remove all unpredictability from people's lives. Another 1998 movie, Pleasantville, depicts a 1950s style community that is tightly controlled and characterized by a high degree of conformity and uniformity. This is reflected in the fact that everything is depicted in black and white. As the story unfolds, however, things grow less and less predictable, and color is gradually introduced. In the end, a far more unpredictable Pleasantville is shown in full color. The remake of Fun with Dick and Jane, 2005, as well as Revolutionary Road, 2008, deal with couples who have, and then gradually lose, the seemingly ideal suburban home and lifestyle. Although they strive hard to be as predictable as possible, some of the more recent chains are finding a high degree of predictability an elusive goal. For example, haircutting franchises such as Hair Cuttery, its 750 salons in 16 states, cannot offer a uniform haircut because every head is slightly different and every barber or hairdresser operates in a slightly idiosyncratic fashion. To reassure the anxious customer longing for predictability, Mastercups, Great Clips, Hair Cuttery, and other haircutting franchises offer a common logo and signs, similar shop setup, and perhaps a few familiar products. Scripting interaction with customers, even more reminiscent of the Truman Show, are the scripts that McDonaldized organizations prepare for employees. In the movie, every character's interaction with Truman followed a script provided by the director to make Truman's actions more predictable. The fast food industry, Howdy, Partner, and Happy Trails. Perhaps the best-known scripts at McDonald's are, "Do you want fries with that?" and "Would you like to add an apple pie to that order?" Such scripts help create highly predictable interactions between workers and customers. While customers do not follow scripts, they tend to develop their own simple recipe, like responses to the employees of McDonaldized systems. The Roy Rogers chain used to have its employees, dressed in cowboy and cowgirl uniforms, say, "Howdy, partner," to every customer about to order food. After paying for the food, people were sent on their way with happy trails. The repetition of these familiar salutations, visit after visit, was a source of great satisfaction to regulars at Roy Rogers. Many people, and including me, felt a deep personal loss when Roy Rogers ceased this practice. However, in a McDonaldized society, other types of pseudo-interactions are increasingly the norm. Consumers have come to expect and maybe even like them. And they might even look back on them longingly when interactions with their favorite robot are all they can expect on their visits to fast food restaurants. Like all other aspects of McDonaldization, scripts can have positive functions. For example, scripts can be a source of power to employees, enabling them to control interaction with customers. Employees can fend off unwanted or extraordinary demands merely by refusing to deviate from the script. Employees can also use their routines and scripts to protect themselves from the insults and indignities frequently heaped on them by the public. Employees can adopt the view that the public's hostility is aimed not at them personally, but at the scripts and those who created them. Overall, rather than being hostile towards scripts and routines, McDonald's workers often find them useful and even satisfying. However, employees and customers sometimes resist scripts and other routines. As a result, what those who give and receive services actually say is never entirely predictable. People do not yet live in an iron cage of McDonaldization. In fact, they are unlikely ever to live in a totally predictable, completely McDonaldized world. Nonetheless, what McDonald's workers could do to exert some independence in their work is hardly overwhelming. For example, they could say all sorts of things that are not in the script. Go a bit beyond the routine by providing extra services or exchanging pleasantries, and withhold smiles, act a bit impatient or irritated, or refuse to encourage the customer to return. These all seem like very small deviations from an otherwise highly routinized workday. As in the case of workers, customers also gain from scripts and routines. Routinization can provide service, recipients with more reliable, less expensive, or speedier service, can protect them from incompetence, can minimize the interactive demands on them, and can clarify what their rights are. Such routines help guarantee equal treatment of all customers. Finally, routinization can help establish a floor of civility and competence for which many customers have reason to be grateful. Some customers appreciate the polite, ritualized greetings they encounter at McDonaldized businesses. However, there are exceptions. Some customers may react negatively to employees mindlessly following scripts who seem unresponsive or robot-like. Arguments can ensue, and angry customers may even leave without being served. In a classic scene from 5 Easy Pieces, a 1970, Jack Nicholson's character stops at a diner and encounters a traditional greasy spoon waitress who is following a script. He cannot get an order of toast, although he could order a sandwich made with toast. Nicholson's character reacts even more strongly and negatively to the unresponsive script than he does to the surly waitress. The fake friendliness of scripted interaction reflects the insincere camaraderie. "Have a nice day" that characterizes not only fast food restaurants, but also all other elements of McDonaldized society. A camaraderie used to lure customers and keep them coming back. For example, before his death, TV screens were saturated with scenes of Wendy's owner and founder, Dave Thomas, extending a personal invitation to join him for a burger at his restaurant. Other settings. Even the jokes are scripted. The fast food industry is far from the only place where we are likely to encounter scripted interaction. Telemarketing is another setting that usually provides scripts that workers must follow unerringly. The scripts are designed to handle most foreseeable contingencies. Supervisors often listen in on solicitations to make sure employees follow the correct procedures. Employees who fail to follow the scripts, or who do not meet the quotas for the number of calls made and sales completed in a given time, may be fired summarily. Robin Ledner details how Combined Insurance tried to make life insurance sales predictable. The most striking thing about Combined Insurance's training for its life insurance agents was the amazing degree of standardization for which the company was striving. The agents were told, in almost hilarious detail, what to say and do. In fact, a large portion of the agent's sales pitch was supposed to be memorized and recited as precisely as possible. One of the trainers told of a foreign salesman whose English was poor. He learned the script phonetically and didn't even know what the words meant. He sold 20 applications on his first day and is now a top executive. The insurance agents were even taught the company's standard joke, as well as the combined shuffle, standardized movements, body carriage, and intonation. McDonald's relies on external constraints on its workers, but Combined Insurance attempts to transform its workers. Combined workers are supposed to embrace a new self-a Mech's identity. In contrast, McDonald's employees are expected to suppress themselves. This dissimilarity is traceable to differences in the nature of the work in the two settings. Because McDonald's workers perform their tasks within the work setting, they can be controlled by external constraints. In contrast, combined insurance salespeople work door to door, with most of their work done inside customers' homes. Because external constraints do not work, Combined tries to change the agents into the kind of people the company wants. Despite the efforts to control their personalities, however, the insurance agents retain some discretion as well as a sense of autonomy. Although control over combined workers goes deeper, McDonald's workers are still more controlled because virtually all decision-making is removed from their jobs. Ledner concludes, "No detail is too trivial, no relationship too personal, no experience too individual, no manipulation too cynical for some organization or person, in a spirit of helpfulness or efficiency, to try to provide a standard, replicable routine for it, making employee behavior predictable. The assembly line enhanced the likelihood of predictable work and products." The problem with the alternative is that the steps a craftsperson takes are somewhat unpredictable, varying from person to person and over time. Small but significant differences in the finished products crop up, and they lead to unpredictabilities in the functioning and quality of the goods. For instance, one car produced by a craftsperson would run far better or be much less prone to breakdowns than a car produced by another. Cars produced on an assembly line are far more uniform. Realizing the benefits to be gained from predictable worker performance, many non-manufacturing industries now have highly developed systems for making employee behavior more routine. The fast food industry. Even Hamburger University's professors behave predictably, because interaction between customer and counterperson in the fast food restaurant is limited in length and scope. It can be largely routinized. McDonald's thus has a series of regulations that employees must follow in their dealings with customers. There are, for example, 7 steps to window service. Greet the customer, take the order, assemble the order, present the order, receive payment, thank the customer, and ask for repeat business. Fast food restaurants also seek to make other work as predictable as possible. For example, all employees are expected to cook hamburgers in the same, best way. In other words, Frederick Taylor's principles can be applied to assembling hamburgers as easily as to other kinds of tasks. Employees follow well-defined steps in preparing various foods. The following are those involved in preparing French fries in much of the fast food industry. Open the bag of frozen fries. Fill the basket half full. Put the basket in the deep fry machine. Push the timer. Remove the basket from the fryer and dump the fries into holding trays. Shake salt on the fries. Push another timer. Discard the fries that are unsold after several minutes. Look at the computer screen to see what size fries the next customer requires. Fill another fry container and put it in a holding bin in preparation for preparing the next batch of fries. Fast food restaurants try in many ways to make workers look, act, and think more predictably. All employees must wear uniforms and follow dress codes for things such as makeup, hair length, and jewelry. Training programs are designed to indoctrinate the worker into a corporate culture, such as the McDonald's attitude and way of doing things. Highly detailed manuals spell out, among other things, how often the bathroom must be cleaned to the temperature of grease used to fry potatoes, and what color nail polish to wear. Finally, incentives, awards, for example, are used to reward employees who behave properly and disincentives, ultimately firing, to deal with those who do not. To help ensure predictable thinking and behavior among restaurant managers, McDonald's has them attend its Central Hamburger University in Oak Brook, Illinois, or one of its branches throughout the United States and the world, Sydney, Munich, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Brazil. Hamburger University was begun in 1961, has about 5,000 students a year, and has graduated more than 80,000 of them. It offers separate tracks for crew, restaurant managers, mid-level managers, and executives. Even the 19 full-time professors at Hamburger University behave predictably because they work from scripts prepared by the Curriculum Development Department. Trained by such teachers, managers internalize McDonald's ethos and its way of doing things. As a result, in demeanor and behavior, McDonald's managers are hard to distinguish from one another. More important, because the managers train and oversee workers to help make them behave more predictably. Managers use elaborate corporate guidelines that detail how virtually everything is to be done in all restaurants. McDonald's central headquarters periodically sends forth undercover inspectors to be sure that these guidelines are being enforced. These inspectors check to see that the food meets quality control guidelines. Other settings. That Disney look, amusement parks have adopted many similar techniques. Disney has developed detailed guidelines about what its employees should look like, the Disney look, and how they should act. Disney has assembled a long list of do's and don'ts for employees. Female cast members, a Disney euphemism for its park employees, may not use beads as part of a braided hairstyle, shave their head or eyebrows, or use extreme hair coloring. Only neutral nail polish is allowed, and fingernails must not be more than 1/4 of an inch in length. Neat mustaches are permitted for male hosts, but beards and goatees are not. Male cast members are allowed to shave their heads, but not their eyebrows. The list goes on and on. Disney is not alone among amusement parks in the effort to make employee behavior predictable. At Busch Gardens, Virginia, a certain amount of energy is devoted to making sure that smiles are kept in place. There are rules about short hair for the boys and no eating, drinking, smoking, or straw chewing on duty for everyone. Not only do the employees at Busch Gardens all look alike, but they are also supposed to act alike. Controlled environments hinge on the maintenance of the right kind of attitude among the lower echelons. It is kind of a raw thing. We emphasize cleanliness, being helpful, being polite. Consequently, there is a lot of talk at Busch Gardens about keeping people up and motivated. There are contests to determine who has the most enthusiasm and best attitude. Such techniques ensure that visitors to Busch Gardens and parks like it can expect to see and deal with highly predictable employees throughout their visit. Creating predictable products and processes. The drive for increased predictability extends, not surprisingly, to the goods and services being sold and the methods used to produce and deliver them. Consider the uniformity that characterizes the chain stores, Apple, Banana Republic, Foot Locker, Old Navy, United Colors of Benetton, Victoria's Secret, etc., dominating virtually all malls. Few of the products are unique. Indeed, many are globally available brand names and procedures for displaying merchandise, greeting customers, ringing up purchases, and so on are amazingly similar. The fast food industry. Even the pickles are standardized. Needless to say, the food purveyed in fast food restaurants is highly predictable. A short menu of simple foods helps ensure predictability. Hamburgers, fried chicken, pizza, tacos, French fries, soft drinks, shakes, and the like are all relatively easy to prepare and serve in a uniform fashion. Predictability in such products is made possible by the use of uniform raw ingredients, identical technologies for food preparation and cooking, similarity in the way the food is served, and identical packaging. As a trainer at Hamburger University puts it, McDonald's has standards for everything down to the width of the pickle slices. Packaging is another important component of predictability in the fast food restaurant. Despite the fast food restaurant's best efforts, unpredictabilities can creep in because of the nature of the materials. The food might not be hot enough. The chicken might be gristly or tough, or there may be too few pieces of pepperoni on a particular slice of pizza. Whatever the slight unpredictabilities in the food, the packaging, containers for the burgers, bags for the small fries, cardboard boxes for the pizzas, can always be the same and imply that the food will be too. Predictable food also requires predictable ingredients. McDonald's has stringent guidelines on the nature, quality, size, shape, and so on of the meat, chicken, fish, potatoes, and other ingredients purchased by each franchisee. The buns, for example, must be made of ordinary white bread from which all the chewy and nutritious elements of wheat, such as bran and germ, have been milled out. One wit said of mass-produced white bread, "I thought they just blew up library paste with gas and sent it to the oven, because buns otherwise might grow stale or moldy. Preservatives are added to retard spoilage." Pre-cut, uniform, frozen French fries rather than fresh potatoes are used. The increasing use of frozen, or freeze dried foods addresses unpredictabilities related to the supply of raw materials. One of the reasons Ray Kroc eventually substituted frozen for fresh potatoes was that for several months a year, it was difficult to obtain the desired variety of potato. Freezing potatoes made them readily available year-round. In addition, the potato peelings at each McDonald's outlet often created a stench that was anathema to Kroc and the sanitized, sterile world he sought to create. Frozen, peeled, and pre-cut French fries solved this problem as well. The predictability of foods in a McDonaldized society has led to a disturbing fact. Regional and ethnic distinctions are disappearing from American cooking. Food in one neighborhood, city, or state looks and tastes pretty much like food anywhere else. Sophisticated processing and storage techniques, fast transport, and a creative variety of formulated convenience food products have made it possible to ignore regional and seasonal differences in food production. Entertainment. Welcome to Mech Movie World. The earlier discussion of Psycho brings to mind the fact that the movie industry, too, values predictability. Psycho was followed by several sequels as well as a later 1998 shot-by-shot remake of the original. 2011 saw an unusually large number of sequels, including the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean and On Stranger Tides, Scream 4, Spy Kids 4, Final Destination 5, and Part 8 of the Harry Potter movies. The all-time leaders among sequels are the 12 Friday the 13th movies and the 23 James Bond movies. These predictable products generally attract a large audience, but they often succeed at the expense of movies based on new concepts, ideas, and characters. The studios like sequels. Welcome to Movie World. Because the same characters, actors, and basic plot lines can be used again and again. Furthermore, sequels are more likely to succeed at the box office than completely original movies. Profits are therefore more predictable. Viewers presumably like sequels because they enjoy the comfort of encountering favorite characters, played by familiar actors who find themselves in accustomed settings. Like a McDonald's meal, many sequels are not very good, but at least consumers know what they are getting. Movies themselves seem to include increasingly predictable sequences and highly predictable endings. Dustin Hoffman contends that today's movie audiences would not accept the many flashbacks, fantasies, and dream sequences of his classic 1969 movie, Midnight Cowboy. He believes that this may be emblematic of the whole culture. Now people want to know what they're getting when they go to the movies. On television, the parallel to sequels is copycatting or producing sitcoms and comedies that are so similar as to be indistinct. For example, they all gather in apartments and offices that tend to have a heightened, overly colorful, casual, by design look, and they exchange jokes that frequently depend on body parts or functions for their punch. Among recent or current TV fare, Seinfeld, Friends, Will and Grace. Everybody Loves Raymond. The Office, Parks and Recreation, and 2.5 Men come to mind. A variety of successful shows such as CSI and NCIS and Law and Order have had several spin-offs, e.g., NCIS, Los Angeles, and all follow a given formula. Successful TV shows such as Survivor and American Idol have spawned a number of shows that emulate the model they created. Real Housewives of Orange County has spawned, among others, Real Housewives of New York City, Atlanta, Miami, and Beverly Hills. Like McDonald's, Primetime wants you to know exactly what you'll get no matter where you are, emphasizing the comforts of predictability over nutrition. Another form of entertainment that aims to provide no surprises is the cruise, which is as oriented to predictability as it is to efficiency. A cruise originating from the United States will likely be made up of like-minded Americans. Cruise ship operators have turned travel into a highly predictable product by creating trips that allow minimal contact with the people, culture, and institutions of visited countries. This result creates a paradox. People go to considerable expense and effort to go to foreign countries, where they have as little contact as possible with native culture. American package tour agencies use American air carriers wherever possible or local transports that offer the amenities expected by American tourists, such perhaps even air, conditioning, stereo, and bathroom. Tour guides are usually Americans or people who have spent time in America. At the very least, natives fluent in English who know all about the needs and interests of Americans. Restaurants visited on the tour are either Americans, perhaps associated with an American fast food chain, or cater to the American palate. Hotels are also likely to be either American chains, such as the Sheraton and Hilton, or European hotels that have structured themselves to suit American tastes. Each day offers a firm, often tight schedule, with little time for spontaneous activities. Tourists can take comfort from knowing exactly what they are going to do on a daily, even hourly, basis. John Urry argues that the package tour has declined in popularity in recent years. How do we reconcile this contention with the idea that McDonaldization is increasing? The answer lies in the fact that most societies have grown increasingly McDonaldized, with the result that there may be less need for McDonaldized tours. After all, since people traveling practically anywhere are likely to find McDonald's, Holiday Inn, Hard Rock Cafe, USA Today Y, and CNN, they may feel less need to be protected from unpredictabilities. Many of them have already been eliminated. Sports. There's even a McStables. In tennis, the tiebreaker has made tennis matches more predictable. Prior to tiebreakers, to win a set, a player needed to win 6 games with a 2-game margin over their opponent. If the opponent was never more than 1 game behind, the set could go on and on. Some memorable, interminable tennis matches produced scores on the order of 12-10. With limitations imposed by television and other mass media, the tennis establishment decided to institute the tiebreaker in many tournaments. If a set is deadlocked at 6 games each, a 12-point tiebreaker is played. The first player to get 7 points with a 2-point margin wins. A tiebreaker might go beyond 12 points if the players are tied at 6 points each. But it rarely goes on nearly as long as close matches occasionally did. An interesting example of predictability in a previously highly unpredictable area is in the rationalization of racehorse training. There is even a Circle McStables in Texas and a 3-bar McStables in Oklahoma. While these are one-of-a-kind operations, Trainer D. Wayne Lucas has set up a string of stables around the United States that some have labeled Mesty Stables. In the past, training stables were independent operations specific to a given track. Training procedures varied greatly from one racetrack to another and from one stable to another. Lucas, however, has been successful by establishing and supervising far-flung divisions of his stable. He said, "The barns are the same. The feeding program is the same. There's never an adjustment necessary. It's the McDonald's principle. Minimizing danger and unpleasantness. The attraction of the shopping mall can be credited, at least in part, to its ability to make shopping more predictable. For example, one kid who works here at a mall told me why he likes the mall. It's because no matter what the weather is outside, it's always the same in here. He likes that. He doesn't want to know it's raining. It would depress him." Those who wander through malls are also relatively free from the crime that might beset them in city streets. The lack of bad weather and the relative absence of crime point to another predictable aspect of shopping malls. They are always upbeat. Avoiding crime is a key factor in the rise of so-called family fun or pay-to-play centers. Often, children pay an entrance fee, although, in a cute gimmick, parents may be free. These centers offer ropes, padded mountains, tubes, tunnels, giant blocks, trapezes, and so on. They have proven popular in urban areas because they provide a safe haven in crime-ridden cities. Children are also seen as less likely to injure themselves in fun centers than in community playgrounds, because of the nature of the equipment and the presence of staff supervisors. And there are safety checks to be sure that children do not leave with anyone but their parents. However, although fun centers are undoubtedly safer and less unpredictable, they have also been described as antiseptic, climate-controlled, plastic worlds. Modern amusement parks are in many ways much safer and more pleasant than their hunky-tunk ancestors. The Disney organization quite clearly knew that to succeed, it had to overcome the unpredictability of old amusement parks. Disneyland and Walt Disney World take great pains to be sure that the visitor is not subject to any disorder. We have already seen how the garbage is whisked away so that people do not have to be disturbed by the sight of trash. Vendors do not sell peanuts, gum, or cotton candy because those items would make a mess underfoot. Visitors will not likely have their day disrupted by the sight of public drunkenness. Crime in the parks is virtually non-existent. Disney offers a world of predictable, almost surreal, orderliness. Few unanticipated things happen on any of the rides or in any of the attractions in contemporary theme parks. Of the Jungle Cruise ride at Disney World, a company publication says, "The Jungle Cruise is a favorite of armchair explorers because it compresses weeks of safari travel into 10 minutes of fun, without mosquitoes, monsoons, or misadventures." At one time, people went camping to escape the predictable routines of their daily lives. City dwellers fled their homes in search of nature, with little more than a tent and a sleeping bag. Little or nothing lay between the camper and the natural environment, leading to some unpredictable events. But that was the whole point. Campers might see a deer wander close to their campsite, perhaps even venture into it. Of course, they might also encounter the unexpected thunderstorm, tick bite, or snake. But these were accepted as an integral part of escaping one's routine activities. Some people still camp this way. However, many others have sought to eliminate unpredictability from camping. Said the owner of one campground, "All they wanted in the past was a space in the woods and an outhouse. But nowadays people aren't exactly roughing it. Instead of simple tents, modern campers might venture forth in a recreational vehicle, CRV such as a Winnebago, or take a trailer with an elaborate pop-up tent to protect them from the unexpected." Of course, camping in an RV also tends to reduce the likelihood of catching sight of wandering wildlife. Furthermore, the motorized camper carries within it all the elements one has at home: refrigerator, stove, television, portable DVD player, iPad, smartphone, and iPod base. Camping technology not only has made for great predictability, but has also changed modern campgrounds. Relatively few people now pitch their tents in the unpredictable wilderness. Most find their way into rationalized campgrounds, even country club campgrounds, spearheaded by franchises such as Campgrounds of America, IKEA, the latter with more than 450 sites. Said one camper relaxing in his air-conditioned 32-foot trailer, "We've got everything right here. It doesn't matter how hard it rains or how the wind blows." Modern campgrounds are likely to be divided into sections. One for tents, another for RVs. Each section broken into neat rows of usually tiny campsites. Hookups allow those with RVs to operate the various technologies encased within them. Campsite owners might also provide campers who are roughing it with amenities such as a well, stock delicatessen, bathrooms and showers, heated swimming pools, a game room loaded with video games, a laundromat, a TV room, a movie theater, and even entertainment such as bands or comedians. There is certainly nothing wrong with wanting to be safe from harm. However, society as a whole has surrendered responsibility for providing safe environments to commercial interests. Because our city streets are often unsafe, people shop in malls. Because our playgrounds are sometimes unsafe and greatly limited, children play in commercial, fun centers. The problem is that people are therefore spending large amounts of leisure time in commercial environments, eager to lead them into a life of consumption. If the larger society provided safe and attractive recreation centers For both adults and children, we would not be forced to spend so much of our lives and do so many things in commercial venues. The irony is that, despite their claim to safety, McDonaldized locations, especially fast food restaurants, seem particularly prone to crime and violence. Said the owner of a fast food outlet, fast food for some reason is a target. Perhaps the iron cage sometimes forces people to lash out in the setting that is its leading example. Control, human and non-human robots. The fourth dimension of McDonaldization is increased control of humans through the utilization of non-human technology. Technology includes not only machines and tools, but also materials, skills, knowledge, rules, regulations, procedures, and techniques. Technologies thus encompass not only the obvious, such as robots and computers, but also the less obvious, such as the assembly line, bureaucratic rules, and manuals prescribing accepted procedures and techniques. A human technology, a screwdriver, for example, is controlled by people. A non-human technology, at the order window at the drive-through, for instance, controls people. The great source of uncertainty, unpredictability, and inefficiency in any rationalizing system is people, either those who work within it or those served by it. Hence, efforts to increase control are usually aimed at both employees and customers, although processes and products may also be the targets. Organizations have historically gained control over people gradually through increasingly effective technologies. Eventually, they began reducing people's behavior to a series of machine-like actions. And once people were behaving like machines, they could be replaced with actual machines. The replacement of humans by machines is the ultimate stage in control over people. People can cause no more uncertainty and unpredictability because they are no longer involved, at least directly, in the process. As Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee point out in their 2011 book, Race Against the Machina, How the Digital Revolution is Accelerating Innovation, driving productivity, and irreversibly transforming employment and the economy, large numbers of people in the age of accelerating digital technology are losing the race against technology. Computerized technology is now doing the work that, at one time, was the domain of people. Control is not the only goal associated with non-human technologies. These technologies are created and implemented for many reasons, such as increased productivity, improved quality, and lower cost. However, this chapter is mainly concerned with the ways non-human technologies have increased control over employees and consumers in a McDonaldizing society. Controlling employees. Before the age of sophisticated non-human technologies, people were largely controlled by other people. In the workplace, owners and supervisors controlled subordinates directly, face-to-face. But such direct, personal control is difficult, costly, and likely to engender personal hostility. Subordinates might strike out at an immediate supervisor or an owner who exercises excessively tight control over their activities. Control through a technology is easier, less costly in the long run, and less likely to engender hostility towards supervisors and owners. Over time, control by people has thus shifted toward control by technologies. McDonald's controls employees by threatening to use, and ultimately using, technology to replace human workers, no matter how well they are programmed and controlled. Workers can fool up the system's operation. A slow worker can make the preparation and delivery of a Big Mac inefficient. A worker who refuses to follow the rules might leave the pickles or special sauce off a hamburger, thereby making for unpredictability. And a distracted worker can put too few fries in the box, making an order of large fries seem skimpy. For these and other reasons, McDonald's and other fast food restaurants have felt compelled to control and ultimately replace human beings with machines. Technology that increases control over workers helps McDonaldized systems assure customers that their products and services will be consistent. The fast food industry. From human to mechanical robots, fast food restaurants have coped with problems of uncertainty by creating and instituting many non-human technologies. Among other things, they have done away with a cook, at least in the conventional sense. Of the cook, Jerry Newman says, "What a crock." Neither McDonald's nor Burger King had a cook. Technology has all but eliminated this job. Grilling a hamburger is so simple that anyone can do it with a bit of training, even when more skill is required, as in the case of cooking an Arby's roast beef. The fast food restaurant develops a routine involving a few simple procedures that almost anyone can follow. Cooking fast food is like a game of Connect. The dots are painting by numbers. Following prescribed steps eliminates most of the uncertainties of cooking. Much of the food prepared at McDonaldized restaurants arrives preformed, pre-cut, pre-sliced, and pre-prepared. All employees need to do, when necessary, is cook or often merely heat the food and pass it on to the customer. Instead of having employees cut lettuce at the local McDonald's restaurants in Great Britain, the following high-tech operation does it for them at a central location. The iceberg lettuce in the factory that supplies McDonald's is shredded at a rate of 1,000 cog an hour by a 22-blade machine you wouldn't under any circumstances want to fall into. After that, its ordeal is far from over. It drops onto a conveyor belt, which propels it at 4 meters per second into a fluorolaser optical sorting machine that cost the company a cool £350,000. The machine uses the latest in laser and digital camera technology to analyze the color and density of the lettuce shreds. It takes tens of thousands of scans a second to identify rogue chunks, grit, and discoloration. When an anomaly is spotted, the air guns 50 cm further along the belt are primed. 1/8 of a second later, the jets blast the offending matter out of the flow. Of course, lettuce is just the tip of the iceberg. Each constituent part of a Big Mac, from the burger to the sesame seed bun, has a process of massive industrial scale behind it. At Taco Bell, workers used to spend hours cooking meat and shredding vegetables. The workers now simply drop bags of frozen, ready cooked beef into boiling water. They have used pre-shredded lettuce for some time, and more recently, pre-shredded cheese and prediced tomatoes have appeared. The more that is done by non-human technologies before the food arrives at the restaurant, the less workers need to do and the less room they have to exercise their own judgment and skill. McDonald's has gone further than most other chains in developing technologies to control employees. For example, its soft drink dispenser has a sensor that automatically shuts off the flow when the cup is full. Ray Kroc's dissatisfaction with the vagaries of human judgment led to the elimination of French fry machines controlled by humans and to the development of machines that ring or buzz when the fries are done, or that automatically lift French the basket sign, fry batch the French out of the hot oil. When an employee controls the French fry machine, misjudgment may lead to undercooked, overcooked, or even burned fries. Kroc fretted over this problem. "It was amazing that we got them as uniform as we did, because each kid working the fry vats would have his own interpretation of the proper color and so forth. Bah. At the cash register, workers once had to look at a price list and punch the prices in by hand. Hence, the wrong, even lower amount could be rung up. Computer screens and computerized cash registers, point of sale registers, forestall that possibility. All that the employees need to do is press the image on the register that matches the item purchased. The machine then produces the correct price. If the objective in a fast food restaurant is to reduce employees to human robots, we should not be surprised by the spread of robots that prepare food. For example, a robot cooks hamburgers at one campus restaurant. Robots offer a number of advantages: lower cost, increased efficiency, fewer workers, no absenteeism, and a solution to the decreasing supply of teenagers needed to work at fast food restaurants. The professor who came up with the idea for the robot that cooks hamburgers said, "Kitchens have not been looked at as factories, which they are. Fast food restaurants were the first to do that." Taco Bell developed a computer-driven machine the size of a coffee table that can make and seal in a plastic bag a perfect hot taco. Another company worked on an automated drink dispenser that produced a soft drink in 15 seconds. Orders are punched in at the cash register by a clerk. A computer sends the order to the dispenser to drop a cup, fill it with ice and appropriate soda, and place a lid on top. The cup is then moved by conveyor to the customer. These technologies have yet to be widely used, although Starbucks has its automated machines that grind beans and spit out espresso. When such technologies are refined and prove to be less expensive and more reliable than humans, fast food restaurants will employ them widely. Even managers are not immune from efforts to find non-human controls over them. There is a computerized system that, among other things, tells managers how many hamburgers or orders of French fries they will require at a given time, the lunch hour, for example. The computerized system takes away the need for managers to make such judgments and decisions. Thus, burger production has become an exact science in which everything is regimented, every distance calculated, and every dollop of ketchup monitored and tracked. Education, child care centers, an even more extreme version of the emphasis on non-human technology appears in the child care equivalent of the fast food restaurant, KinderCare, which was founded in 1969 and is now part of the Knowledge Learning Corporation. There are more than 1,600 KinderCare learning centers in the United States. More than 300,000 children between the ages of 6 weeks and 12 years attend the centers. KinderCare tends to hire short-term employees with little or no training in child care. What these employees do in the classroom is largely determined by an instruction book with a ready-made curriculum. Staff members open the manual to find activities spelled out in detail for each day. Clearly, a skilled, experienced, creative teacher is not the kind of person child care centers seek to hire. Relatively untrained employees are more easily controlled by the non-human technology of the omnipresent instruction book. Another example of organizational control over teachers is the franchised Sylvan Learning Center, often thought of as the McDonald's of education. There are about 900 Sylvan Learning Centers worldwide, and they claim to have helped 2 million students. Sylvan Learning Centers are after-school centers for remedial education. The corporation trains staff and tailors a McDonald's type uniformity, down to the U, shaped tables at which instructors work with their charges through their training methods, rules, and technologies. 4. Profit systems such as the Sylvan Learning Center exert great control over their teachers on health care, who's deciding our fate. As is the case with all rationalized systems, medicine has moved away from human and toward non-human technologies. The two most important examples are the growing importance of standardized treatment protocols and automated diagnostic tools. For example, the prospective payment and DRG diagnosis related group systems, not physicians and their medical judgment, tend to determine how long a patient must be hospitalized. Similarly, the doctor operating alone out of a black bag with a few simple tools has become virtually a thing of the past. Instead, doctors serve as dispatchers, sending patients onto the appropriate machines and specialists. Computer programs can even diagnose illnesses, although it is unlikely that they will ever replace the physician. Computers may one day be the initial, if not the prime, diagnostic agents. It is now even possible for people to get diagnoses, treatment, and prescriptions over the internet with no face-to-face contact with a physician. These and other developments in modern medicine demonstrate increasing external control over medical practice. For-profit hospitals, health maintenance organizations, at HMOs, and government programs such as Medicare exert growing influence over medical decisions. Even in its heyday, the medical profession was not free of external control, but now the nature of the control is changing, and its degree and extent are increasing greatly. Instead of decisions being made by mostly autonomous doctors in private practice, doctors are more likely to conform to bureaucratic rules and regulations. In bureaucracies, employees are controlled by their superiors. Physicians' superiors are increasingly likely to be professional managers rather than other doctors. As medical machines grow more sophisticated, physicians come to understand them less and are therefore less able to control them. Instead, control shifts to the technologies themselves and to the experts who create and handle them. An excellent example of increasing external control over physicians and other medical personnel is the use of standardized treatment protocols known as pathways. These pathways consist of a series of if-then decision points. If a certain circumstance exists, the action to follow is prescribed. What physicians do in a variety of situations is determined by the pathway rather than the individual physician. Various terms have been used to describe pathways: standardization, cookbook, medicine, a series of recipes, a neat package tied together with a bow, and all describe the rationalization of medical practice. The point is that there are prescribed courses of action under a wide range of circumstances. While doctors need not, and indeed should not, follow a pathway at all times, they do so most of the time. A physician who spearheads the protocol movement says he grows concerned when physicians follow a pathway more than 92% of the time. Let us take, for example, an asthma patient. In this case, the pathway says that if the patient's temperature rises above 100°, a complete blood count is to be ordered. A chest X-ray is needed under certain circumstances. If it's the patient's initial wheezing episode, or if there is chest pain, respiratory distress, or a fever of others. And so it goes. While there are undoubted advantages associated with such pathways, e.g., lower likelihood of using procedures or medicines that have been shown not to work, they do tend to take decision-making away from physicians. The workplace. Do as I say, not as I do. Most workplaces are bureaucracies that can be seen as large-scale non-human technologies. Their innumerable rules, regulations, guidelines, positions, lines of command, and hierarchies dictate what people do within the system and how they do it. The consummate bureaucrat thinks little about what is to be done. He or she simply follows the rules, deals with incoming work, and passes it on to its next stop in the system. Employees need do little more than fill out the required forms. These days most likely write on the computer screen. At the lowest levels in the bureaucratic hierarchies, blue-collar work, scientific management clearly strove to limit or replace human technology. For instance, the Cohn best way required workers to follow a series of predefined steps in a mindless fashion. More generally, Frederick Taylor believed that the most important part of the work world was not the employees, but rather the organization that would plan, oversee, and control their work. Although Taylor wanted all employees to be controlled by the organization, he accorded managers much more leeway than manual workers. The task of management was to study the knowledge and skills of workers and to record, tabulate, and ultimately reduce them to laws, rules, and even mathematical formulas. In other words, managers were to take a body of human skills, abilities, and knowledge and transform them into a set of non-human rules, regulations, and formulas. Once human skills were codified, the organization no longer needed skilled workers. Management would hire, train, and employ unskilled workers in accordance with a set of strict guidelines. In effect, then, Taylor separated head work from hand work. Prior to Taylor's day, the skilled worker had performed both. Taylor and his followers studied what was in the heads of those skilled workers, then translated that knowledge into simple, mindless routines that virtually anyone could learn and follow. Workers were thus left with little more than repetitive hand work. This principle remains at the base of the movement to replace human with non-human technology throughout our McDonaldizing society. Behind Taylor's scientific management and all other efforts at replacing human with non-human technology lies the goal of being able to employ human beings with minimal intelligence and ability. In fact, Taylor sought to hire people who resembled animals, who had the mental makeup of oxen. Not coincidentally, Henry Ford had a similar view of the kinds of people who were to work on his assembly lines. The average worker, I am sorry to say, wants a job in which he does not have to think. The kind of person sought out by Taylor was the same kind of person Ford thought would work well on the assembly line. In their view, such people would more likely submit to external technological control over their work and perhaps even crave such control. CAPR 4A, predictability and control. Not surprisingly, a perspective similar to that held by Taylor and Ford can be attributed to other entrepreneurs. The obvious irony is that the organizations built by W. Clement Stone Escher, the founder of Combined Insurance, and Ray Kroc, both highly creative and innovative entrepreneurs, depend on the willingness of employees to follow detailed routines precisely. Many workplaces have come under the control of non-human technologies. In the supermarket, for example, the checker once had to read the prices marked on food products and enter them into the cash register. As with all human activities, however, the process was slow, with a chance of human error. To counter these problems, many supermarkets installed optical scanners, which read a code preprinted on each item. Each code number calls up a price already entered into the computer that controls the cash register. This non-human technology has thus reduced the number and sophistication of the tasks performed by the checker. Only the less skilled tasks remain, such as physically scanning the food and bagging it. And even those tasks are being eliminated with the development of self-scanning and having consumers bag their own groceries. In other words, the work performed by the supermarket checker, when it hasn't been totally eliminated, has been de-skilled. That is, a decline has occurred in the amount of skill required for the job. Control is exerted over the phone heads, or customer service representatives, who work for many companies. Those who handle reservations for the airlines, for example, United Airlines, must log every minute spent on the job and justify each moment away from the phone. Employees have to punch a potty button on the phone to let management know of their intentions. Supervisors sit in an elevated tower in the middle of the reservations floor, observing like every prison guards the movements of every operator in the room. They also monitor phone calls to make sure that employees say and do what they are supposed to. This control is part of a larger process of 100% supervision increasingly taking hold in so many workplaces, not just airline reservation centers but customer service and data processing bidders' rising level of employee scrutiny. No wonder customers often deal with representatives who will and exactly love computermans. Process departments and Dlikini, said one employee of United Airlines. My body became an extension of the computer terminal that I typed the reservations into. I came to feel emptied of self. Sometimes, telephone service representatives are literally prisoners. Prison inmates are now used in many states in this way, and the idea is currently on the legislative table in several more states. The attractions of prisoners are obvious. They work for very little pay and can be controlled to a far higher degree than even the phone heads discussed above. Furthermore, they can be relied on to show up for work. As one manager put it, I need people who are there every day. The McDonaldization of Society, 20th Anniversary Edition. Following this logical progression, some companies now use computer callers instead of having people solicit us over the phone. Computer voices are far more predictable and controllable than even the most rigidly controlled human operator, including prisoners. Indeed, in our increasingly McDonaldized society, I have had some of my most interesting conversations with such computer voices. Of course, lower-level employees are not the only ones whose problem-solving skills are lost in the transition to more non-human technology. I have already mentioned the controls on professors and doctors. In addition, pilots flying the modern, computerized airplane, such as the Boeing 787 and the Airbus 380, are being controlled and, in the process, de-skilled. Instead of flying by the seat of their pants, or occasionally using old-fashioned autopilots for simple maneuvers, modern pilots can push a few buttons and lean back while the plane flies to its destination and lands on a predetermined runway, said one FAA official. We're taking more and more of these functions out of human control and giving them to machines. These airplanes are in many ways safer and more reliable than older, less technologically advanced models. Pilots, dependent on these technologies, however, may lose the ability to handle emergency situations creatively. The problem, said one airline manager. Is that? I don't have computers that will do that. Be creative. I just don't. By controlling customers, employees are relatively easy to control because they rely on employers for their livelihood. Customers have much more freedom to bend the rules and go elsewhere if they don't like the situations in which they find themselves. Still, McDonaldized systems have developed and honed a number of methods for controlling customers. The fast food industry. Get the hell out of there. Whether they go into a fast food restaurant or use the drive-through window, customers enter a kind of conveyor system that moves them through the restaurant in the manner desired by the management. It is clearest in the case of the drive-through window. If the energy for this conveyor comes from one's own automobile, but it is also true for those who enter the restaurant. Consumers know that they are supposed to line up, move to the counter, order their food, pay, carry the food to an available table, eat, gather up their debris, deposit it in the trash receptacle, and return to their cars. 3 mechanisms help control customers. Customers receive cues, for example, the presence of lots of trash receptacles, especially at the exits, that indicate what is expected of them. A variety of structural constraints lead customers to behave in certain ways. For example, the drive-through window, as well as the written instructions on the menu marquee at the counter and elsewhere, gives customers few, if any, alternatives. Customers have internalized taken for granted norms and follow them when they enter a fast food restaurant. When my children were young, they admonished me after we finished our meal at McDonald's. I ate in fast food restaurants in those days. Before I saw the light, for not cleaning up the debris and carting it to the trash can. My children were, in effect, serving as agents for McDonald's, teaching me the norms of behavior in such settings. IKEAization and most others have long since internalized these norms, and I still dutifully follow them these days on the rare occasions that a lack of any other alternative or the need for a reasonably clean restroom forces me into a fast food restaurant. One goal of control in fast food restaurants is Starbucks is an exception, at least to some degree, see Chapter 7, is to influence customers to spend their money and leave quickly. The restaurants need tables to be vacated rapidly so other diners will have a place to eat their food. A famous old chain of cafeterias, the Automat, was partly undermined by people who occupied tables for hours on end. The Automat became a kind of social center, leaving less and less room for people to eat the meals they had purchased. The death blow was struck when street people began to monopolize the Automat's tables. Some fast food restaurants employ security personnel to keep street people on the move or in the suburbs to prevent potentially rowdy teenagers from monopolizing tables or parking lots. In some cases, fast food restaurants have put up signs limiting a customer's stay in the restaurant, and even its parking lot, say, to 20 minutes. More generally, fast food restaurants have structured themselves so that people do not need or want to linger over meals. Easily consumed finger foods make the meal itself a quick one. Some fast food restaurants use chairs that make customers uncomfortable after about 20 minutes. Much the same effect is produced by the colors used in the decor. From the scarlet and yellow of the logo to the maroon of the uniform, everything clashes. It's designed to stop people from feeling so comfortable they might want to stay. Other settings. It's like boot camp, grade schools, have developed many ways to control students. Kindergarten has been described as an educational boot camp. Students are taught not only to obey authority, but also to embrace the rationalized procedures of rote learning and objective testing. More important, spontaneity and creativity tend not to be rewarded and may even be discouraged, leading to what one expert calls education for docility. Those who conform to the rules are thought of as good students. Those who don't are labeled bad students. As a general rule, the students who end up in college are the ones who have successfully submitted to the control mechanisms. Creative, independent students are often, from the educational system's point of view, messy, expensive, and time-consuming. The clock and the lesson plan also exert control over students, especially in grade school and high school, because of the tyranny of the clock. A class must end at the sound of the bell, even if students are just about to comprehend something important. Because of the tyranny of the lesson plan, a class must focus on what the plan requires for the day, no matter what the class, and perhaps the teacher, may find interesting. Imagine a cluster of excited children trying examining a turtle with enormous fascination and intensity. Now, children, put away the turtle, the teacher insists. We're going to have our science lesson. The lesson is on crabs. In the healthcare industry, the patient, then along with the physician, is increasingly under the control of large, impersonal systems. For example, in many medical insurance programs, patients can no longer decide on their own to see a specialist. The patient must rather first see a primary care physician, who must decide whether a specialist is necessary. Because of the system's great pressure on the primary care physician to keep costs down, fewer patients visit specialists, and primary care physicians perform more functions formerly handled by specialists. The supermarket scanners that control checkers also control customers. When prices were marked on all the products, customers could calculate roughly how much they were spending as they shopped. They could also check the price on each item to be sure that they were not being overcharged at the cash register. But with scanners, it is almost impossible for consumers to keep tabs on prices and on the cashiers. Supermarkets also control shoppers with food placement. For example, supermarkets take pains to put the foods that children find attractive in places where youngsters can readily grab them, for example, low on the shelves. Also, what a market chooses to feature via special sale prices and strategic placement in the store profoundly affects what is purchased. Manufacturers and wholesalers battle one another for coveted display positions, such as at the front of the market or at the end caps of aisles. Foods placed in these positions will likely sell far more than they would if they were relegated to their usual positions. Malls also exert control over customers, especially children and young adults, who are programmed by the mass media to be avid consumers. Going to the mall can become a deeply ingrained habit. Some people are reduced to zombies, shopping the malls hour after hour, weekend after weekend. More specifically, the placement of food courts, escalators, and stairs forces customers to traverse corridors and pass attractive shop windows. Benches are situated so that consumers might be attracted to certain sites, even though they are seeking a brief respite from the labors of consumption. The strategic placement of shops, as well as goods within shops, leads people toward products in which they might not otherwise have been interested. controlling the process and the product. In a society undergoing McDonaldization, people are the greatest threat to predictability. Control over people can be enhanced by controlling processes and products. But control over processes and products also becomes valued in itself. Food production, cooking, and vending, it cooks itself in the fast food industry. Companies have lengthy procedure manuals that exert considerable control over processes and products. For example, as a result of such procedures, Burger King Whoppers are cooked the same way at all restaurants in the chain, and the same is true for the McDonald's Quarter Pounders and their garnishes. Technologies designed to reduce uncertainties are also found throughout the manufacture of food. For example, the mass manufacturing of bread is not controlled by skilled bakers who lavish love and attention on a few loaves of bread at a time. Such skilled bakers cannot produce enough bread to supply the needs of our society. Furthermore, the bread they do produce can suffer from the uncertainties involved in having humans do the work. The bread may, for example, turn out to be too brown or too doughy. To increase productivity and eliminate these unpredictabilities, mass producers of bread have developed an automated system in which, as in all automated systems, humans play a minimal role rigidly controlled by the technology. The most advanced bakeries now resemble oil refineries. Flour, water, a score of additives, and huge amounts of yeast, sugar, and water are mixed into a broth that ferments for an hour. More flour is then added, and the dough is extruded into pans, allowed to rise for an hour, then moved through a tunnel oven. The loaves emerge after 18 minutes, to be cooled, sliced, and wrapped. In one food industry after another, production processes in which humans play little more than planning and maintenance roles have replaced those dominated by skilled craftspeople. The warehousing and shipping of food has been similarly automated. Further along in the food production process, other non-human technologies have affected how food is cooked. Technologies such as ovens with temperature probes decide for the cook when food is done. Many ovens, coffee makers, and other appliances can turn themselves on and off. The instructions on all kinds of packaged foods dictate precisely how to prepare and cook the food. Premixed products, such as Mrs. Dash, eliminate the need for the cook to come up with creative combinations of seasonings. Even cookbooks were designed to take creativity away from the cook and control the process of cooking. Some rather startling technological developments have occurred in the ways in which animals are raised for food. For instance, aquaculture is growing dramatically, especially in China, because of the spiraling desire for seafood in an increasingly cholesterol-conscious world. Instead of the old inefficient, unpredictable methods of harvesting fish, a lone angler casting a line or even boats catching tons of fish at a time in huge nets, we now have the much more predictable and efficient farming of seafood. More than half of the fresh salmon found in restaurants is now raised in huge sea cages off the coast of Norway. Almost all of the shrimp consumed in the United States is farmed and imported. Sea farms offer several advantages. Most generally, aquaculture allows humans to exert far greater control over the vagaries that beset fish in their natural habitat, thus producing a more predictable supply. Various drugs and chemicals increase predictability in the amount and quality of seafood. Aquaculture also permits a more predictable and efficient harvest because the creatures are confined to a limited space. In addition, Geneticists can manipulate them to produce seafood more efficiently. For example, it takes a standard halibut about 10 years to reach market size, but a new dwarf variety can reach the required size in only 3 years. Sea farms also allow for greater calculability. The greatest number of fish for the least expenditure of time, money, and energy, relatively small. Family-run farms for raising other animals are being rapidly replaced by factory farms. The first animal to find its way into the factory farm was the chicken. Here is the way one observer describes a chicken factory. A broiler producer today gets a load of 10,000, 50,000, or even more day-old chicks from the hatcheries and puts them straight into a long, windowless shed. Inside the shed, every aspect of the bird's environment is controlled to make them grow faster on less feed. Food and water are fed automatically from hoppers suspended from the roof. The lighting is adjusted. For instance, there may be bright light 24 hours a day for the first week or two to encourage the chicks to gain weight quickly. Among its other advantages, such chicken farms allow one person to raise more than 50,000 chickens. Raising chickens this way ensures control over all aspects of the business. For instance, the chicken's size and weight are more predictable than that of free-ranging chickens. Harvesting chickens confined in this way is also more efficient than catching chickens that roam over large areas. However, confining chickens in crowded quarters creates unpredictabilities, such as violence and even cannibalism. Farmers deal with these irrational vices in a variety of ways, such as dimming the lights as chickens approach full size and debeaking chickens so they cannot harm each other. Some chickens are allowed to mature so they can be used for egg production. However, they receive much the same treatment as chickens raised for food. Hens are viewed as little more than converting machines that transform raw material as feed into a finished product, eggs. Peter Singer describes the technology employed to control egg production. The cages are stacked in tiers, with food and water troughs running along the rows, filled automatically from a central supply. They have sloping wire floors. The slope makes it more difficult for the birds to stand comfortably, but it causes the eggs to roll to the front of the cage, where they can easily be collected. In the more modern plants, they are carried by conveyor belt to a packing plant. The excrement drops through the wire floor and can be allowed to pile up for many months, until it is all removed in a single operation. This system obviously imposes great control over the production of eggs, leading to greater efficiency, a more predictable supply, and more uniform quality than the old chicken coop. Other animals, pigs, lambs, steers, and calves especially, are raised similarly to prevent calves' muscles from developing, which toughens the veal. They are immediately confined to tiny stalls where they cannot exercise. As they grow, they may not even be able to turn around. Being kept in stalls also prevents the calves from eating grass, which would cause their meat to lose its pale color. The stalls are kept free of straw, which, if eaten by the calves, would also darken the meat. They are fed a totally liquid diet based on non-fat milk powder with added vitamins, minerals, and growth-promoting drugs, says Peter Singer in his book Animal Liberation. To make sure the calves take in the maximum amount of food, they are given no water, which forces them to keep drinking their liquid food. By rigidly controlling the size of the stall and the diet, veal producers can maximize two quantifiable objectives: the production of the largest amount of meat in the shortest possible time, and the creation of the tenderest, whitest, and therefore most desirable veal. Employment of a variety of technologies obviously leads to greater control over the process by which animals produce meat, thereby increasing the efficiency, calculability, and predictability of meat production. In addition, the technologies exert control over farm workers. Left to their own devices, ranchers might feed young steers too little or the wrong food, or permit them too much exercise. In fact, in the rigidly controlled factory ranch, human ranch hands and their unpredictabilities are virtually eliminated. The ultimate examples of control, birth and death. Not just fish, chickens, and calves are being McDonaldized through increasing control, but people are as well, especially in the processes of birth and death. Controlling conception. Even Granny can conceive, conception is rapidly becoming McDonaldized, and increasing control is being exercised over the process. For example, the problem of male impotence has been attacked by burgeoning impotence clinics, some of which have already expanded into chains, and an increasingly wide array of technologies, including medicine as especially Viagra, Cialis, and others, and mechanical devices. Many males are now better able to engage in intercourse and to play a role in pregnancies that otherwise might not have occurred. Similarly, female infertility has been ameliorated by advances in the technologies associated with artificial, more precisely, donor insemination, in vitro fertilization, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, various surgical and non-surgical procedures associated with the Wern technique, at-home fertility kits, and so on. Some fertility clinics have grown so confident that they offer a money-back guarantee if there is no live baby after 3 attempts. For those women who still cannot become pregnant or carry to term, surrogate mothers can do the job. Even postmenopausal women now have the chance of becoming pregnant as granny pregnancies. The oldest, thus far, is a 70-year-old Indian woman who gave birth to twins in 2008. These developments and many others, such as ovulation, predictor home tests, have made having a child far more predictable, efficient, easy to use. Home pregnancy tests are also available to take the ambiguity out of determining whether a woman has become pregnant. One of the great unpredictabilities tormenting some prospective parents is whether the baby will turn out to be a girl or a boy. Sex selection clinics can be found in the United States, Canada, Australia, England, India, and Hong Kong, as part of what may eventually become a full-scale chain of gender choice centers. The technology, developed in the early 1970s, is actually rather simple. Semen is filtered through albumin to separate sperm with male chromosomes from sperm with female chromosomes. The woman is then artificially inseminated with the desired sperm. The chances of creating a boy are 75%, a girl 70%. A new technique uses staining of sperm cells to determine which cells carry sex in male and Y female chromosomes. Artificial insemination or in vitro fertilization then mates the selected sperm with an egg. Microsort technology offers a couple an 89.5% chance of creating a girl. The probabilities of creating a boy are 73.6%. The goal is to achieve 100% accuracy in using male or female sperm to tailor the sex of the offspring to the needs and demands of the parents. The increasing control over the process of conception delights some but horrifies others. Being able to specify your child's sex in advance leads to nightmare visions of ordering babies with detailed specifications. like cars with automatic transmission or leather upholstery. Said a medical ethicist. Choosing a child like we choose a car is part of a consumerist mentality. The child becomes a product, rather than a full human being. By turning a baby into just another product, to be McDonaldized, engineered, manufactured, and commodified, people are in danger of dehumanizing the birth process. Of course, we are just on the frontier of the McDonaldization of conception, and just about everything else. For example, the first cloned sheep, Dahlia now deceased, was created in Scotland in 1996, and other animals have since been cloned, opening the door to the possibility of cloning humans. Cloning involves creating identical copies of molecules, cells, or even entire organisms. This conjures up an image of the engineering and mass production of a cookie-cutter race of people, all good-looking, athletic, intelligent, free of genetic defects, and so on, the ultimate in the control of conception. And a world in which everyone was the same would be a world in which they would be ready to accept a similar sameness in everything around them. Of course, this is a science fiction scenario, but the technology needed to take us down this road is already here. Controlling pregnancy. Choosing the ideal baby. Some parents wait until pregnancy is confirmed before worrying about the sex of their child. But then, amniocentesis can be used to determine whether a fetus is male or female. First used in 1968 for prenatal diagnosis, amniocentesis is a process whereby fluid is drawn from the amniotic sac, usually between the 14th and 18th weeks of pregnancy. With amniocentesis, parents might choose to exert greater control over the process by aborting a pregnancy if the fetus is of the wrong sex. This technique is clearly far less efficient than pre-pregnancy sex selection because it occurs after conception. In fact, very few Americans, only about 5% in one study, say that they might use abortion as a method of sex selection. However, amniocentesis does allow parents to know well in advance what the sex of their child will be. Concern about a baby's sex pales in comparison to concerns about the possibility of genetic defects. In addition to amniocentesis, a variety of recently developed tests can be used to determine whether a fetus carries genetic defects, such as cystic fibrosis, Down syndrome, Huntington's disease, hemophilia, Tay-Sachs disease, and sickle cell disease. These newer tests include the following: chorionic villus sampling, and CVSO, generally done earlier than amniocentesis, between the 10th and 12th weeks of pregnancy. CVS involves taking a sample from the finger-like structures projecting from the sac that later becomes the placenta. These structures have the same genetic makeup as the fetus. Maternal serum alpha, fetaprotein, and MSAFP testing. This procedure is a simple blood test done in the 16th to 18th weeks of pregnancy. A high level of alpha, fetaprotein might indicate spina bifida. A low level might indicate Down syndrome. Ultrasound. This technology is derived from sonar and provides an image of the fetus by bouncing high-frequency energy off it. Ultrasound can reveal various genetic defects, as well as many other things as sex, gestational age, and so on. The use of all these non-human technologies has increased dramatically in recent years, with some ultrasound, MSAFP already routine practices. Many other technologies for testing fetuses are also available, and others will undoubtedly be created. If one or more of these tests indicate the existence of a genetic defect, then abortion becomes an option. Parents who choose abortion are unwilling to inflict the pain and suffering of genetic abnormality or illness on the child and on the family. Eugenicists feel that it is not rational for a society to allow genetically disabled children to be born and to create whatever irrationalities will accompany their birth. From a cost-benefit point of view, calculability. Abortion is less costly than supporting a child with serious physical or mental abnormalities or problems, sometimes for a number of years. Given such logic, it makes sense for society to use the non-human technologies now available to discover which fetuses should be permitted to survive and which should not. The ultimate step would be a societal ban on certain marriages and births, something China has considered, with the goal of reducing the number of sick or retarded children that burden the state. Efforts to predict and repair genetic anomalies are proceeding at a rapid rate. The Human Genome Project has constructed a map of the human genome's gene containing regions. When the project began, only about 100 human disease genes were known. Today, we know many more such genes. This knowledge will allow scientists to develop new diagnostic tests and therapeutic methods. Identification of where each gene is and what each does will also extend the ability to test fetuses, children, and prospective mates for genetic diseases. Prospective parents who carry problematic genes may choose not to marry or not to procreate. Another possibility, sen, and fear is that, as the technology gets cheaper and becomes more widely available, people may be able to test themselves. We already have home pregnancy tests, and then make a decision to try a risky home abortion. Overall, human mating and procreation will come to be increasingly affected and controlled by these new non-human technologies. Controlling childbirth, birth as pathology, McDonaldization, and increasing control is also manifest in the process of giving birth. One measure is the decline of midwifery, a very human and personal practice. In 1900, midwives attended about half of American births, but by 1986, they attended only 4%. Midwifery enjoyed a slight renaissance, however, because of the dehumanization and rationalization of modern childbirth practices, and 6.5% of babies in the United States were being delivered by midwives in the late 20th century, and that increased by a third in the first decade of the 21st century. Worldwide, 2/3 of all births involve midwives. When asked why they sought out midwives, women mention things such as the callous and neglectful treatment by the hospital staff, labor unnecessarily induced for the convenience of the doctor, and unnecessary cesareans for the same reason. The use of midwives also decon medicus of birth process by professional to an increase in the confined due to the birth process for the same reason. Especially obstetricians who are most likely to rationalize and dehumanize the birth process. Dr. Michelle Harrison, who served as a resident in obstetrics and gynecology, is but one physician willing to admit that hospital birth can be a dehumanized process. The increasing control over childbirth is also demonstrated by the degree to which it has been bureaucratized. Social childbirth. The traditional approach once took place largely in the home, with female relatives and friends in attendance. Now, childbirth takes place almost totally in hospitals, alone among strangers. In 1900, less than 5% of U.S. took place in hospitals. By 1940, hospital births totaled 55%, and by 1960, the process was all but complete, with nearly 100% of births occurring in hospitals. In more recent years, hospital chains and birthing centers have emerged, modeled after the fast food restaurant as a paradigm for the rationalization process. Over the years, hospitals and the medical profession have developed many standard, routinized and McDonaldized procedures for handling and controlling childbirth. One of the best known, created by Dr. Joseph DeLee, was widely followed throughout the first half of the 20th century. DeLee viewed childbirth as a disease, a pathologic process, and his procedures were to be followed even for low-risk births. The patient was placed in the lithotomy position, lying supine with legs in the air, bent and wide apart, supported by stirrups. The mother-to-be was sedated from the first stage of labor on. An episiotomy was performed to enlarge the area through which the baby must pass. Forceps were used to make the delivery more efficient. Describing this procedure, one woman wrote, "Women are herded like sheep through an obstetrical assembly line, are drugged and strapped on tables, where their babies are forceps delivered." DeLee's standard practice includes not only control through non-human technology, the procedure itself, forceps, drugs, and an assembly line approach, but also most of the other elements of McDonaldization. Efficiency, predictability, and the irrationality of turning the human delivery room into an inhuman baby factory. The calculability that it lacked was added later in the form of Emanuel Friedman's Friedman curve. This curve prescribed 3 rigid stages of labor. For example, the first stage was allocated exactly 8.6 hours, during which cervical dilation was to proceed from 2 to 4 centimeters. The moment babies come into the world, they are greeted by a calculable scoring system, the APGAR test. The babies receive scores of 0 to 2 on each of 5 factors, as for example, heart rate, color, with 10 being the healthiest total score. Most babies have scores between 7 and 9 a minute after birth, and scores of 8 to 10 after 5 minutes. Babies with scores of 0 to 3 are considered to be in very serious trouble. Dr. Harrison wonders why medical personnel don't ask about more subjective things, such as the infant's color, curiosity, and mood. The use of various non-human technologies for delivering babies has ebbed and flowed. The use of forceps, invented in 1588, reached a peak in the United States in the 1950s, when as many as 50% of all births involved their use. Forceps fell out of vogue, however, and by the 1980s, only about 15% of all births employed forceps, and their use continues to decline. Many methods of drugging mothers-to-be have also been widely used. The electronic fetal monitor became popular in the 1970s. Today, ultrasound is a popular technology. Another worrisome technology associated with childbirth is the scalpel. Many doctors routinely perform episiotomies during deliveries so that the opening of the vagina does not tear or stretch unduly. Often done to enhance the pleasure of future sex partners and to ease the passage of the infant, episiotomies are quite debilitating and painful for the woman. Dr. Harrison expresses considerable doubt about episiotomies. "I want those obstetricians to stop cutting open women's vaginas. Childbirth is not a surgical procedure. The scalpel is also a key tool in cesarean sections. Birth, a perfectly human process, has come to be controlled by this technology, and those who wield it in many cases. The first modern C-section took place in 1882, but as late as 1970, only 5% of all births involved cesarean. Its use skyrocketed in the 1970s and 1980s, reaching 25% of all births in 1987 in what has been described as a national epidemic. By the mid-1990s, the practice had declined slightly to 21%. However, as of August 2002, 25% of births were once again by cesarean, and the rate in the United States was 30.3% by 2005, rising to 32% by 2007. First-time C-sections were at an all-time high of almost 17% in 2005, and the rate of vaginal births after a previous cesarean was down to 16.5%. This latter occurred even though the American College of Obstetricians formally abandoned the time-honored idea. Once a cesarean, always a cesarean. That is, it no longer supports the view that, once a mother has a cesarean section, all succeeding births must be cesarean. In addition, many people believe that cesareans are often performed unnecessarily. The first evidence belief is historical data. Why did we see a sudden need for so many more cesareans? Weren't cesareans just as necessary a few decades ago? The second clue regarding unnecessary cesareans is data indicating that private patients who can pay are more likely to get cesareans than those on Medicaid, which reimburses far less, and are twice as likely as indigent patients to get cesareans. Are those with higher incomes really more likely to need cesareans than those with lower incomes? One explanation for the dramatic increase in cesareans is that they fit in well with the idea of substituting non-human for human technology. But they also mesh with the other elements of the McDonaldization of society. They are more predictable than the normal birth process, which can occur a few weeks or even months early or late. It is frequently noted that cesareans generally seem to be performed before 5:30 p.m., so that physicians can be home for dinner. Similarly, well-heeled women may choose a cesarean so that the unpredictabilities of natural childbirth do not interfere with careers or social demands. As a comparatively simple operation, the cesarean is more efficient than natural childbirth, which may involve many more unforeseen circumstances. Cesarean births are more calculable, normally involving no less than 20 minutes and no more than 45 minutes. The time required for a normal birth, especially a first birth, is far more variable. Irrationalities exist. See Chapter 5 for more on the irrationality of rationality, including the risks associated with surgery, anesthesia, hemorrhage, blood replacement. Compared with those who undergo a normal childbirth, women who have cesareans experience more physical problems and a longer period of recuperation, and the mortality rate can be as much as twice as high. There are also higher costs associated with cesareans. One study indicated that physicians' costs were 68% higher and hospital costs 92% higher for cesareans compared with natural childbirth. Cesareans are dehumanizing because a natural human process is transformed, often unnecessarily, into a non-human or even inhuman process in which women endure a surgical procedure. At the minimum, many of those who have cesareans are denied unnecessarily the very human experience of vaginal birth. The wonders of childbirth are reduced to the routines of a minor surgical procedure. Controlling the process of dying. Designer deaths. We have now found ways to rationalize the dying process, giving us at least the illusion of control. Consider the increasing array of non-human technologies designed to keep people alive long after they would have expired had they lived at an earlier time in history. In fact, some beneficiaries of these technologies would not want to stay alive under those conditions. A clear irrationality. Unless the physicians are following an advance directive, a living will that explicitly states, "Do not resuscitate," or "No heroic measures," people lose control over their own dying process. Family members, too, in the absence of such directives, must bow to the medical mandate to keep people alive as long as possible. Computer systems may be used to assess a patient's chances of survival at any given point in the dying process. 90%, 50%, 10%, and so on. The actions of medical personnel are likely to be influenced by such assessments. Death has followed much the same path as birth. That is, the dying process has been moved out of the home and beyond the control of the dying and their families and into the hands of medical personnel and hospitals. Physicians have gained a large measure of control over death, just as they won control over birth. Death, like birth, is increasingly likely to take place in the hospital. In 1900, only 20% of deaths took place in hospitals. By 2007, 32% of U.S. deaths occurred in hospitals, 20% occurred in nursing homes, and still another 38.5% occurred in hospices since 2008 data. The growth of hospital chains and chains of hospices, using principles derived from the fast food restaurant, signals death's bureaucratization, rationalization, and even McDonaldization. The McDonaldization of the dying process, as well as of birth, has spawned a series of counterreactions. Efforts to cope with the excesses of rationalization. Advanced directives and living wills tell hospitals and medical personnel what they may or may not do during the dying process. Suicide societies and books, such as Derek Humphrey's Final Exit, give people instructions on how to kill themselves. There is the growing interest in and acceptance of euthanasia, most notably the work of Dr. Death, Jack Kevorkian, whose goal was to return to people control over their own deaths. Finally, many people are choosing to die at home, and some are even opting to be buried there as well. However, these counterreactions themselves have elements of McDonaldization. For example, Dr. Kevorkian, who died in 2011, used a non-human technology, a machine, to help people kill themselves. More generally, and strikingly, he was an advocate of a rational policy for the planning of death. The rationalization of death is thus found even in the efforts to counter it. Overall, the future will bring with it an increasing number of non-human technologies, with ever greater ability to control people and processes. However, more and more people will lose the opportunity, and perhaps the ability, to think for themselves.